If anyone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in a Magic Anonymous meeting, I would have laughed and said there's no such thing. Yet here I am, studying the faint glow in my hands, waiting for it to fade away for good. My body is a lead balloon, heavy yet hollow, and waiting for that next hit of fairy blood so the glow can come back and all the perks with it. Never was a junkie of any sort. I have what one person I met called a PhD, pothead degree, but that's about it. I hate how drinking alcohol makes me feel, and I had experimented with hard drugs, but I never really liked them. But that fairy blood, oh my god. It is not just euphoria, it is power and the taste of a deity's feast that linger for weeks. At first, anyway. Tolerance builds up quickly, and when once I needed one fairy to last a month, now it's three fairies a week. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's slow down and start at the beginning for the people who may be new here. I had found a bottle of clearly Canadian at the grocery store. Does anybody remember the flavored sparkling water back in the late 1990s? Well, someone pointed me in the direction where I could get some. And as luck would have it, I got the last bottle. At a friend's house, putting my PhD to good use. Well, clumsy me, of course, spilled the drink all over the hardwood floor. I apologized profusely, huffing as I got up to get a towel because I didn't know when I'd be able to get my hands on another bottle. My friend waved his hand and smiled, giving me a quick "no worries" and guided me to sit down. He then walked up to the spill, holding his hands directly over it, and a bright glow emanated from his hands as the liquid reversed course back into the bottle. It then righted itself on the completely dry floor. He picked it up and handed it to me. I was flabbergasted. How on earth did you do that? He gave me a smile and a wink and told me, it's a secret. After everyone else had left, I stayed behind to clean up. He asked me how I liked his little parlor trick. So, did you reverse time or something? Is Charmed a documentary? He let out a laugh. You know how you always insist fairies are real? He asked me, opening the cabinet and moving stuff around to get to the back. He pulled out a jar set up like a terrarium with two fairies fluttering around in it. The jar was maybe big enough to hold a gallon worth of liquid. I stepped closer, tapping lightly on the glass. A bright light flashed and a small crack appeared on the side. Oh, it's a good thing these are going to be used up. Don't do that. They're stronger than they look. Little pissies, too, even when they're not captured. He put the jar down and grabbed a syringe, filling it with sugar water. I took a closer look as he gave them their treat. They looked like little green men with transparent butterfly wings outlined in luminescence. Their faces were twisted in malice and mischief. You caught yourself some pixies. He nodded and stayed silent as he waited. The pixies fell asleep in their leaves. It was at this point that he pulled out a needle and a syringe, draining them to complete exsanguination. They popped after their last drop was taken. Nothing but dust. Put the blood into two glasses and filled them with orange juice. I always get the best results from juices with citrus, he told me, handing me my cup. Now you're probably thinking, wasn't she horrified by this? But to be completely honest, there are not very many non malevolent fairies out there, which is not the same as benevolent, of which there are even fewer. And I didn't see this carnivorous act as too far out there. And, and, and it's not like they were gonna be coming to my house. It was the tastiest orange juice I had ever had the pleasure to sip. I opened the fridge to see it was just a carton of Minute Maid, but it tasted like heaven in my mouth. He laughed. Yeah, I've been doing this for 6 months and I still have to check. Do you capture the fairies yourself? He nodded, finished his glass, then rinsed it out. He stood and waited for me. I did not keep him waiting long. "You'll want to sit down for the first couple of minutes," he told me, rushing to the couch. As if on cue, my legs stopped working and I dropped to the floor. I was shaking, but it was not distressful. I felt the euphoria and power that I had spoken of earlier going through my bloodstream, seeping into my organs. It was like my body was rebuilding itself. When I was complete, I stood up, a brand new person. "Yeah, it hits hard the first time," he tells me. He grabbed my hand and rotated them, palm facing up. They emanated a slight glow. He closed my palms, then opened his. His glow was brighter, almost covering his hands completely. "You have their power now. You can break something without touching it, like the fairy did. Please don't do that here. You can reverse time, like I did. You can move stuff without going near it." I looked down and concentrated, watching as the glow ebbed on my skin. An instant later, he shouted, "Stop!" urgently curling my fingers over my palms. "This is dangerous. You have to let me finish." "Sorry." He stood in silence for a second. I could tell by the look on his face he was trying to figure out how to teach me. "The best way I can put it," he began, "is you can't think too much about it. It has to be like second nature, like moving your arms and legs. You don't think about it longer than it takes to decide you want to move them." My expression must have betrayed my confusion. He kept his grip on my hands. "Keep these closed. We're going to the park and I'm showing you how to do this." I nodded, then he let me go and grabbed his keys. We walked to the door, to his truck. He opened the door for me so I could keep my palms shut, and I fumbled my way into the passenger seat. And when we had gotten to the park, he drove out to the field where the neighborhood kids play football and soccer and put his truck in park. Hands clenched tightly into fists, I followed him to an old tree about 4 feet thick. He gave me the okay to open my hands and told me to aim at the tree. I did as he said, the glow in my hands getting brighter, and then suddenly breaking out and cracking the tree like a bolt of lightning. "Oh!" I screamed. "I was trying to reverse time." Another bright light, then the crack in the tree was gone. I clamped my hands shut. "Maybe we should have meditated before I gave you the fairy blood." "You think so? Maybe." Okay, I deserve that. It had taken all night and half the day for me to get the hang of it needs to be second nature, but I had finally figured out exactly how that worked. Like the other drugs, I wasn't too fond of the side effects. It would be a little more than a month before the desired effects wore off, dimming little by little as days passed. The withdrawal hit like a freight train. I could feel my body breaking down and my brain was screaming for that glow. I returned to my friend's house. He had been expecting me and already had a jar out filled with fairies. They had already fallen asleep from the sugar water. So, does it make it use psychic too? No, but it enhances your memory, and I do remember very well what it was like to come down the first time. He drained 2 fairies to my one, explaining that it's not as strong for him anymore with just one. I was prepared for the initial hit this time and sat down quickly. It didn't hit me as hard. I probably could have stood with the grace of a newborn calf had I tried, but I stayed seated instead until the feeling passed. I showed him the trick I learned to light candles with my glows. He used telekinesis to make pictures with the candles as he juggled them in the air. We talked and we smoked. He told me he always had a crush on me. I said I liked him too, but never had the guts to say anything. We took our interpersonal relationships to that level and fell asleep tangled into each other. And then we were woken up by the rest of the pixies screaming. He gave them more sugar water and put them in the back of the cabinet when they passed out. Do they eat anything else? Flower nectar in the wild? Do you want to catch some? I nodded excitedly. And you told me it would have to wait till dusk. So we spent the rest of the day enjoying each other's company in bed and out. When it started to get darker, he pulled out an empty terrarium jar and grabbed his keys, motioning for me to follow. We returned to the old tree where he took me the first night. He walked me around it and showed me a mushroom ring hiding behind the leaves. Do not do this unless you have some decent semblance of power, he warned. You consume fairy folklore like fish consume water. I know you know how pixies are. Indeed, I do. I stepped forward, lifting my foot to enter the circle. His hand gripped right around my arm and he pulled me back. What are you thinking? Your impulsiveness is part of your charm, but it is going to get you in trouble. Never walked into a fairy circle. They will snatch you right up. You know better. I know you know better. I stood as still as the tree, afraid to move. How close did I just get to being taken away? And he's right. What exactly was I thinking? He stretched my hands out, palms facing up, just like that first night. Can you control the brightness of your glow? He asked. After I nodded, he said, Good. Now make it dim and brighten it slightly. Do it over and over like a fading pulse. I did as he said, and he did the same. Soon I heard a fluttering of small wings, then another set, then another. Put the light out, he whispered as he did the same for himself. The sound of wings everywhere was deafening. He grabbed the jar and started stalking the sounds, putting the jar down gingerly on the leaves, then snatching it back up at warp speed. He had caught two pixies. Light emanated in the jar, and the crack, much bigger than the one I had seen the first night, spread across glass. It seemed logical that they got more power from the nectar out in the wild. He bumped against me and guided me away. I felt a sharp pressure on my wrist and squeaked, slapping the point of the pain. Smeared on my palm was a pixie. I looked up its blood and spit out what was left of the corpse. What the lore doesn't tell you is that it's like an insect mammal hybrid. The place where the fairy bit me looked like a bad tattoo until it healed up. If you look at my wrist, you can see where it ruined my Mortiz key tattoo. I'm real disappointed about that. Though not as much as the fact that the way the skin heals seems to let off the signal for the other pixies and set me to have more tattoos, so I can no longer go out fairy hunting. My lover and I stay in the same apartment now, and he keeps me well supplied. We both have developed a tolerance, though he is building his much quicker than I. Then the accident happened. He called it the fairies' revenge last night. His brakes stopped working at the most inopportune moment. But then, is there ever a good moment for this to happen? The doctor says the chances of him walking are slim to none. He is terrified and darkened by the experience. Inspection of the car showed that the brake lines were chewed through by some type of small animal. Sure, animal. And me, I can't stand to see him like this. I tried to reverse time to take it all away, but nothing happened as the glow had faded from me too much. I tried catching fairies myself, but as you can see from the bruises all over my body, that did not go well. Then I was guided here, to Magic Anonymous, where I'm told I can get past this addiction with love and support from those who have been there. But I'll be honest with you. I'm here to find someone looking to relapse. Who wants to help me save my boyfriend and catch some fairies for me?